everyone, welcome to EduMatch. Thank you so much for tuning in. Super excited today. We're going to be talking about micro-credentialing and professional learning. So with us today, we have an amazing panel. Super excited for them to introduce themselves and to get the conversation going. So we're going to start with introductions. So Damon, if you could please introduce yourself with your name, what you do, where you're from, and yeah, we'll go from there.
Hi, Damon Torgerson. I'm calling from Seattle, Washington, in particular Kirkland. I'm co-founder of Alludo Learning. Alludo is a gamified learning platform for which we support badging and open badges.
Sweet. Well, we are super excited to have you here. So awesomeness. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you. We'll go next to Noah.
Everybody, Noah Geisel, Denver, Colorado. My background is a Spanish teacher, English ed tech, and teaching a fun class at University of Colorado, Denver right now called Digital Media and Learning. I'm a badge cheerleader, community organizer, big fan. Thanks to Sarah Thomas and a few other awesome collaborators, co-founded #BadgeChat, which happens Mondays at 3:30 Pacific time for Damon, 6:30 East Coast time for Irene and Sarah, and it's a half-hour weekly chat on Mondays to engage just around all things amazingness that people are doing to change the world with digital badge credentials.
All right, awesomeness. Thanks so much for joining us. Great to see you again, Noah. And last and certainly not least, we have our awesome moderator, Irene.
Hi, everyone. I'm Irene Bal. I am in Baltimore, Maryland, and I teach at Loyola University, Maryland. And my background in micro-credentials, less badging, more micro-credentials, is we started creating micro-credentials last year, and we are officially live with some micro-credentials, and they're exclusively for independent school educators currently who are looking to expand. And tonight I'm looking at Damon and Noah for like a lot of guidance, and for you out there for, because I want to pick everyone's brains on how they're doing it and what they're doing.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much for bringing this topic up, because, this is definitely something I'm interested in. So I'm excited to hear the conversation. So I'm gonna let y'all have at it.
Awesome. So we're going to jump right into our first question. And we just want conversation. And Sarah, I do hope you join in, like you said. So our first question is, why do you think micro-credentials and badging are important?
For me personally, I'm pretty passionate about it. So how I spend a lot of my waking hours, and even sometimes when I'm asleep, is thinking about the importance of digital badge credentials. And for me, it's really born out of this solution to a really important problem. That's that we currently don't do a great job as sharing the narrative of who we are as learners and achievers, whether it's students in K-12, professionals, the test scores, certificates, GPA is not getting the job done to help colleges and employers know who we are and what we're bringing to the table. And I'm really excited about digital badges credentials as just their potential to really be game-changing. And to do so, for me, one of the most powerful ways that they're going to be doing it is in ways where we can communicate and share that story of what we've done, what we know, what we've accomplished, and then share that with decision makers in a way that's completely blind to factors like race, gender, last name, that just contribute to perpetuating historical inequities.
That was a great answer. I don't know if I can build on top of that or not. It's wonderful. I think for us, for me, it's a lot of the traditional gatekeepers are falling by the wayside, and you have this notion of individual learners and people with this individual kind of badging or portfolios where we're not fitting into these kind of fixed boxes anymore. So you've got companies like Google and Amazon and Microsoft dropping requirements for degrees and that sort of thing. And so individual learners have to start telling their story. And I think digital badging and credentials support telling of that story. So whether you're looking for employment or for other sorts of things, a lot of the traditional requirements are falling by the wayside, and you have to show, you have to demonstrate what your skill set is, what your experience is. And you're not going to be required to have necessarily a degree or any of these other traditional types of things. So having micro-credentials and digital badging supported by a variety and diverse set of stakeholders is going to be important for learners going forward.
And David, you didn't talk about it, but I know that you have a lot to say about that. Piggyback on your comment about the traditional gatekeepers, and that, I mean, that's something that you guys have just done an amazing job of, right? It is putting learning in the hands of learners and in a way that's fun. I think that's also something that is worth sharing.
Well, for sure, and thank you for bringing that up. But it's so. Our platform and I don't want to talk about our platform necessarily, but our platform allows school districts and that sort of thing to be providers of digital credentials and digital badging. So I can take that information, my skill and experience, and I can share that across districts, across different things. And I think that's the open badge movement and that sort of thing are going to become increasingly important, because I'm going to need to have evidence of my learning and of my experience. And I'm not necessarily going to get it from those traditional gatekeepers, being the large kind of corporate or institutions that maybe I used to have. I'm not saying that those institutions are going to go away and be unimportant anymore, but I think getting more local and having that information conveyed in your digital credentials or digital badges is going to become increasingly important. So is it important that I'm a teacher from a school district, for example, I'm a teacher from a school district and I decide to move to another district, and is it important that I have this master's of public administration or something from an online university or something like that, and not discounting that at all? Or is it more important that I have proof that I was a great educator at this previous school district? And I look in my micro-credentials, and my new district looks at those micro-credentials, and they can see that it's directly applicable to what I'm going to be doing in my new position, my new school, whatever, right? I was an effective teacher. That's becoming, I think, is going to become increasingly important in telling the story of the learner going forward. So yeah, I think and you can make it fun. You can have a lot of fun with it too.
And before Irene goes to the next question, like, one thing that Damon said that I think is really important for people to realize is that we can attach evidence, right? That unlike the history of credentialing a certificate, right? You can click on this and see the evidence. And so we don't have to just take people's words for it at the bottom of their resume that they're really good at making seating charts in Infinite Campus, right? Like, maybe your district is issuing the Infinite Campus seating chart wizardry badge, and that there's evidence attached that demonstrating that they have this competency. So when they go to that new school, all of a sudden the principal says, hey, we're so happy to have you here, and everybody's going to be hitting you up in August to help them figure out how to do their seating charts. Thanks.
And something that we identified when we started talking about micro-credentials is that sometimes the educators, they don't want to be complacent, but they don't want to go on, like Damon was saying, to like that next degree, or they don't really want to just hook into this huge thing, but they want a little more. They just don't want that one and done item. They want something to show for it. And that's kind of where we started getting into like the micro-credential. And Valerie on the chat asked, what is the difference between badging and micro-credentialing? I think, Noah, you said you were down for that one.
Yeah, I love this question because it really depends on the use case for the difference. And in a lot of ways, it's squares and rectangles, right? That all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. And so for me, badging is not always going to be digital badge credentialing. And one of the kind of easy litmus tests that I look at is, who's the audience for this? If we're issuing a digital badge that is really just for the person who receives it, and it begins and ends there, it's probably just a badge. And I shouldn't say just a badge. There's nothing wrong with just a badge. It is a badge, and that's what it is. I think when we start to think about a digital badge credential, that's where the value proposition is thinking about a broader ecosystem, to where maybe there is somebody who is actually going, to be sharing this with not just themselves, but mom and dad, colleges, employers, like Damon's example, that when I'm applying for a job, I'm sharing this credential with my future employer because I want them to know these skills that I'm bringing to the table.
And when we were setting ours up, Noah, just what you were speaking on, we really looked at the difference. I mean, we just looked at like, what does badging really mean and what does credentialing really mean? And Since ours had our micro-credentials have the Loyola University Maryland stamp on them, we wanted it to be almost more, what's the word? More formal. And so we decided to go with the word micro-credential and actually put a credential to it. And Michael in the chat asks, can a badge that give you the depth that a course can? And he's thinking that micro-credentials are not so deep, but broad. And I wanted to start that off. So we have decided to, instead of doing broad topics, we're doing very specific topics with our micro-credential, so that you can really dig deep into that one topic. And so I wanted to open it up to Damon and Noah and what you're seeing.
Well, I think that so to Noah's point, squares and rectangles, I think that's a great point. My perspective of it is that badges are a little bit smaller, but again, your mileage may vary. And you can go as deep or broad as you want to, as makes sense for the context. So it's not like well, micro-credential is super narrow but super deep, and you have to go down that path. And whereas a course is this all-encompassing thing. I think those lines are a little bit blurred, and you really have to look at your learners. What's important to them? What are they trying to achieve? And build your badging and your micro-credentials on top of that. And maybe there is this note from our side of things. What we're seeing is smaller amounts of work that can build into larger amounts of work. And so maybe you have a bunch of badges that a person or learner earns, and they get to a certain point, and that equals a micro-credential. And maybe there's 5 micro-credentials in your course, however you want to structure that, whatever makes sense for the context of your learning.
And it's sort of, I think, what Irene talked about a second ago with how certain learners want to continue their education. It's not necessarily, though, that they're seeking this next terminal degree or certificate at a summative level. And a really great use case from a conversation I had with a college that, because of an NDA, I can't say on the air right now, but they very specifically exactly what Irene was saying. They said, and this wasn't for teachers, this was for adult learners though, and saying, we've got people who are being told by their employer, you can get the next promotion if you have this specific skill. Go out to the university and get it. And the university is saying, they maybe don't want to pay to take the whole class, but they would pay to get this one granular unit, this one competency or 2 competencies that are part of this more global class. And so, I think that's one of the really powerful places in the future of learning where this is not, in like a SAMR kind of a sense of substituting what we've already done. This is like functionally the potential is there to do things in really powerful new ways that are all about, going back to what Damon said, putting control in the hands of the learners and achievers.
So,
go ahead, Irene. Sorry.
I was going to lead us into question 2. So, Damon, if you wanted to respond.
Just one point to Noah is exactly like my context as a learner matters. And so maybe I'm a teacher and I'm a special ed teacher, or maybe I'm a carpenter, right? Like you can go in any direction, and I want to learn a specific thing that is important to my context. I don't want to spend a whole bunch of time learning stuff that is interesting and important, but it's not going to help me in my particular context. I think micro-credentials, rather than an entire course that may or may not be applicable to me, allow me to focus in on my context and apply and learn what I need to learn in a certain period of time. And I think that's a really valuable piece that's maybe missing in a larger traditional kind of course format.
And you all are both, Damon and Noah, you were leading very nicely to our next question, which is how do you ensure you're creating topics that are relevant and needed for educators and the community? And then who creates those topics, and the content in those topics?
Well, I don't want to be glib, but the simple answer is you need to talk to your learners, and you need to find out what they need. And then it's, again, not to be trite about it, but then you need to give them what they need. And so listen to them, create your micro-credentials, your badging, your structure of your learning, and tailor it to them to the best that you can, knowing full well that some of them will only, going back to my earlier point of some of them will take what's important to them in their context, and you can't be all things to all people. So I would start with your learners and with your community and talk to them.
And piggyback on what Damon said, I'm very passionate about user-centered design, and yeah, before you go and build something big, take it out and just Play-Doh, pipe cleaner, and stick figure status and show it to people. Go to a school you serve and go to the teacher's lounge and hold up the picture you drew and say, does this look like something that would meet your needs? In some ways, I'm not necessarily one of these, schools need to be more like businesses type of person, but there is something to be said for supply and demand, right? Like if we are creating something for, people, then it makes sense to match the supply to the demand, right? And the easiest way to do that is just ask your users. And and I think, Irene, you talked about the Loyola brand being attached to something, and I think that really addresses a question that it looks like Michael had about context mattering. And maybe I'm misunderstanding his question, but I do think it bears saying that, like during a workshop, just as a way of getting people to know each other, say, hey, make a gift introduction, add a slide to this slide deck with you do a GIF that introduces you to the group, and then you can go earn your Noah Geisel gift introduction badge. Right? That's not going to mean as much to a lot of people as a Loyola University gift introduction badge. And frankly, the badge shouldn't mean anything to anybody, but like as an example, who issues it, right? There is, to the extent context matters, we still care about, well, who says that you earned this badge? If Noah Geisel said it, I don't know that guy. Why does he matter? But this trusted brand, right? And in Damon's case, when Q is putting the brand that they have for tens of thousands of members behind it, that means something.
Well, and Noah and Damon, both of what you said was so true about like talking to the learners and then having that backing. And we were fortunate enough where we had an organization come to us and say, this is what we want and need. And so that was really awesome because we were then able to build and we asked the learners and we pulled the learners, and now it's taking off and it's getting really fast. And like, I liked how you guys start small and, an inch up, and we're kind of fighting against that fast pace because people are like, oh, we want to just make it huge. And it's like, well, we want to make sure that we're, doing the right steps, and we're still hitting a lot of things. And I'm like, I want to just pick your brains all night.
Yeah, and one really great kind of goalpost to start with is if somebody who you think is probably one of your potential users or somebody who fits that user profile, just like if they raise their hand and say, why should I care? Do you have a good answer for that? And that's a really great starting place.
And so that leads us nicely into our third question, because this is the one that I present on the Microcredentials now in the local area, and we showcase what we're doing. And everyone asks about the platform and how it's set up. And I think this is a question that just people want to know, what does it look like? And so, and I know it varies depending, and we had a couple questions in the YouTube chat on that. So just broadly, what does it look like? And how do you set it up?
So for me, I'm incredibly biased in this question because we build a platform that includes badging and learning and that sort of thing. So for us, we have our entire platform, but there are a lot of great platforms to support open badging and micro-credentials out there, and I think you definitely want to be digital in this. So there's Badgeless, there's Badger, there's a whole bunch of really great solutions out there, but you don't even need to be completely digital to do it. So it's not, I don't want to push down that path. I think to be sustainable, you do, but you can have it. So what does it need to be? Well, it needs to be fairly simple. It needs to be fairly open, so that in the case of micro-credentials and certainly in the case of open badges, so that you can vet the evidence, right? You can vet that your learners are getting whatever the information that they have, and that they have been able to do what they want, or not what they want, but what they've said they've done. So that someone else, a third party, can vet that. So if you have an employer, for example, and you say, I'm a perfect, person at playing the violin or whatever, and I played whatever, there needs to be some sort of evidence of that. And they need to be able to see that, and they need to be able to see who provided or who vetted you, right? So if it's Damon's University and whatever, and maybe he doesn't have, then you take that into context. Whereas if it's Loyola University or whomever, right, that carries more weight within the community. So I think it needs to be open. I think it needs to be digital, and it needs to be accessible, and accessible not just for people with sight and that sort of thing, like truly accessible to learners that may not have all the faculties that maybe need a little bit of help on accessibility.
Yeah, one thing Damon said there that I think is really important for anybody watching this is to think about the sustainability piece. If you're somebody who's prone to getting really excited about, say, like using Google tools, and you're thinking to yourself, I'm going to hack this together with this Sheets plugin and Autocrat and blah, blah, blah. Like, I would highly encourage you to give yourself permission to stop and trust that there's like companies like David's and other companies he mentioned, like, this is all they do. And a lot of them have freemium versions to where you can, for free, start to play test this out. And so you will very quickly learn a very hard lesson in sustainability if you try and build something on your own that other people who do this for a living have already done for you. For me personally, I full disclosure, I'm a consultant in this space. And so for me, when I'm working with schools and higher ed institutions, community organizations, I really try and get them to pump the brakes on the what platform do I need question, and to first start out with what do you need question, right? And if you're going to do anything in a Google Sheet, make it a list of functional requirements. What are you looking to do, and how will you know if you're doing it well and serving your users? Do you need certain kinds of data? Damon talked about open badges. Do a little research, find out, do you need to have open badges or not? Hopefully yes, but maybe not. And so, be thinking about these questions so that when you go to a vendor, you're not just, buying into basically, kind of front end UX UI and what looks pretty, and then, thousands of dollars later, or hours of frustration later, finding out this isn't meeting our needs, right? And so it's really important to figure out what are those functional requirements. And I don't feel like I actually answered your question. And when you ask about specific systems, I'd say if folks want to check out something that I've had a lot of work on, if you go to badge.aurorak12.org, there's the Aurora Public Schools badge system that is issuing digital badge credentials to tens of thousands of students in Aurora, Colorado. So it's an example of open badges at scale.
And Damon and Noah, you both touched on, Michael in the chat had a great question about the users and if they have prior learning that's necessary, and how do you know? And that's something that we're running into. This is our first session of our micro-credentials, and our learners are all over. And, and we kind of went in thinking these are going to be some of the innovators, the early adopters, because this is our first round targeting this audience, and we have learners from all over. And so some of them are having trouble just navigating the platform. Some of them are having trouble with a couple of, the things they have to create because we're doing competency-based. And so what do you have, what is your take on that, since you all are both like in it much more than I am?
So I think you're starting to touch into personalization and choice from my perspective on that. And so you are going to have from a digital learning platform kind of perspective, one of the nice things is that you can start to level up all of your learners onto a baseline. And there is value in getting people to the baseline, and you don't want to necessarily force your advanced learners down a narrow path or a basic path if they're already at an advanced level. So you have to take that personalization into account. Again, I think to me, the beauty of say badging and or micro credentials is that that concept of micro allows people to get to the level that they need to be at. So I don't need to have my full course per se and spend 2 months there where I'm already an advanced learner, and I don't need those first 2 months. So I can start to have that choice, my personalization, and I can get to the later parts of the learning. Again, I don't want to say like, oh, get rid of traditional courses and stuff. That's nonsense. I think it serves a very valuable purpose. But in order for you to make this, coming back to the notion of sustainability, you have to bring in your learners at all levels. And so by giving them more choice And micro-credentials allow you kind of by default to give more choice because they are micro. And in the case of badging, from our perspective, you have these bite-sized learning chunks. And so I can, in 5-10 minutes, I can learn something. I can start to build that into my micro-credential. And I can start on a micro-credential that's applicable to me. And so if I'm already, let's say, advanced in a certain topic, I can quickly move through a couple of micro-credentials without having to spend a lot of time because I am competent and capable, and so I can build up my story in that fashion. Whereas a learner who's more at a beginner level, maybe it's going to take them a little bit longer, but because I've got this notion of this smaller pieces, I can start to assemble them into my learning story.
Nicely put, Damon. And that's something that we're learning too, that our learners are progressing at all levels or at all different speeds. And we're also, to go back to Michael's question about the prior learning, we tried to build ours. We only have a few right now, but tried to build them where we had some basic ones. So we try to identify, if you're the beginner learner, this is where you should start. And if you're a little more advanced, then we suggest starting here. And it's a progression. So, you don't have to go in our order, but this is, if you're unsure of where you are, you can start at any level and just see where you fall. And we can always move you if need be. And so getting into our fourth question, because Sarah said we only have a few minutes left. And this kind of goes into Marvia's question that she had. What do you recommend for educators who are interested in bringing micro-credentials and badging into their school and district? And then how does it relate to high stakes testing?
So much to unpack there. I going back to, you said, Irene, I think a little bit ago, to start small. One of my analogies that I've been sharing lately is it's a lot less effort to clean up a spilled punch glass than a spilled punch bowl. And so, don't start with the full punch bowl because you're going to spill. You're going to spill. And so better to start off small so that as you iterate and improve things for your users, it's a much lighter lift to do that. I think leaning on other people who as Michael Folan says, find people whose arrows have already left the quiver, right? And get their lessons learned from them. The Aurora work, again, is at badge.aurorak12.org. It's all shared under a Creative Commons license. And so if there's stuff that you see there that you think will work for your community, you can start on second base and instead of, at the very beginning, right? And as far as tying into the high stakes testing, I think that look at one way that there's probably lots of really great ways to go about it. One place you might start at is look at your data from last year. And if it's aggregated by specific areas where you think there's a lot of opportunity in your school to, score some quick improvement points, maybe that's a great starting place that, standard, 6.A.3 or whatever is all of a sudden this credential, and maybe it's gamified, maybe it's not, but you're creating this way of noticing, naming, and credentialing what your learners are doing, and then it gives this way to shine a light on their learning. Right there's progress monitoring and goal setting that can come into play, and that might start to speak the decision makers' language as a way for them to get behind supporting this, so that it's going to be really impacting the school and its data on how it's judged by the community.
I'm going to echo Noah. Start small. Start with a pilot. Typically, the technology side of things is 25 to 30%. The pilot's going to show you where the gaps are, where your community needs support, where you're going to run into roadblocks and that sort of thing. In your pilot, don't just include your A players. So get a few people that maybe they're skeptics. You don't want to start with people that are out and out against it, but get a few people that are maybe beginner intermediate on the whole thing, and start small and really start to iterate and learn from that. Once you go through a couple of rounds of that, you're going to expose the problems that you need to solve, the challenges that you're going to face, especially when you start to go more broadly. And that's how we do it, and that's how we recommend with our school districts that we work with. So we always start with a pilot. We always identify where the gaps are in learning. We take that opportunity to find out what the community, what the teachers need or want to learn, and we start to build from there, and we iterate. And that's where we find by far the most success.
I'll share one other red flag that piggybacks on what Damon was sharing about, engaging your stakeholders. And that's, have open door meetings, invite people, let it be on them to not show up early, as opposed to 6 months down the road saying, how come we weren't at the table? And one really easy mistake is not inviting the IT department. You've got ed tech there and thinking on the instructional side, but IT is getting invited in way too late. And all of a sudden they're saying, man, if you guys would have just had us here 6 months ago, we could have saved you thousands of dollars and not had to dig this hole only to fill it back in and dig another one 10 feet over. And so, having as many stakeholders who are going to be involved in the project represented early is only going to help make the whole effort stronger.
Awesome. And I know we're going to have to wrap up soon. Sarah gave us the 4-minute warning, but Michael's been asking some great questions on the YouTube chat. And I just wanted to bring a few of them in. And he was talking about resources and finding resources. And Michael is not located in the US. And so it's a little different for him. But then he also asked about the learner's response when they cannot find the learning at their level. Can either of you speak to resources and learners not being able to know where their level is or find their level?
So, yeah. Michael has been asking some great questions, and I didn't want to. We've been moving at a fair clip, so I don't want to discount it. But this is where engaging with your community becomes really important. And so as you're going to be iterating, and you're going to miss some people, and you will never be all things to all people. And I don't want to infer that that's what he's meaning, but as your users and as your learners are saying, hey, what I want to learn is not there. Then you need to respond to that. And again, with smaller pieces of learning, it's more easy to respond to that. Not saying that you'll ever be able to meet them and be able to support that, but you need to go out there and you need to, on a regular basis, engage with your community. And that has nothing to do with technology. Technology can certainly support it. We can do these sorts of chats and that sort of thing. But so does walking to them. Right? Going to their desk, going to their office, going to their classroom, going to where they are, to where they need. And it does multiple things. One, you're going to learn what it is that they need to do.
I know.
They know that it's important. And that's critical especially if you're going to start changing culture.
That's such a good point, David. And so something that we did, I was talking earlier before we went live about our Ed Camp, and that we hosted an Ed Camp yesterday. And so at the Ed Camp, you usually build the session board and everyone puts on, it was physical, so everyone had Post-its and they put them on, and people were tearing down the session board and starting to throw away the Post-its. And I said, wait. And I put them in a bag, I put them in my back pocket, and everyone calls me the hoarder because my office is always full of paper and cardboard and the maker stuff and STEM things. And they said, Irene, you don't need to keep those. And I said, these are future micro-credentials. This bag is worth gold, because we just got 78 opinions on what they want to learn. And so, Damon, exactly what you said. And so Sarah told us we have 1 minute. I want to thank both Noah and Damon. Noah, did you want to say something?
And I'll really quickly just point out that, the badge credentials have digital there, right? And, I have a colleague, Jared Frank, who's always brings back to where's the human element here? And I think that that's something Damon really just captured, that as you're implementing this, especially if you're doing it at scale, the human relational piece and the social capital is how you're going to get momentum going. It's not going to be from, don't think that just because you build it, people are going to come. You're going to need to rely on relationships in a really powerful way. And, and to not get seduced just by the technology, like he was saying. Rico Munn, the superintendent of Aurora, has this quote that I love where he says, every time you think about how cool it is, how innovative it is, stop. Stop at that point and think about how it can impact and change lives. And for me, that's really what this is all about.
Awesome. Damon, any last words?
I don't have any. I'm not gonna build on top of that. That was wonderful, Noah. So I just want to say thank you for having me here. It was fun to participate, and if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to follow up and reach out to anybody that needs support.
Yes. So Damon and Noah, how can we follow up with you? What's your handle? Or
you can follow us on Twitter on Alludo Play, ALLUDO Play. alludolearning.com is our website, and they're two great ways to reach us.
I'm at Senor G on the Twitter, and as I mentioned, hashtag Badge Chat. Also check out hashtag Badge Summit, and bit.ly/Badge Summit is a conference that happens on the day before ISTE every year. So it'll be June 22nd, that Saturday in Philadelphia, 2019. One-day conference with, over 24 breakout sessions, all dedicated all day long to digital badge credentials. I feel comfortable announcing right now for the first time, Minu Rami is going to be keynoting. Really excited. Yeah, I know, I'm beside myself, so I'm so excited. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Registration is not up yet. Proposals are not up yet, but look for that in the coming weeks. That's bit.ly/Badge Summit.
And I was told I didn't get to make it this past year, and everyone said, "You didn't go? How could you not go?" From like our little neck of the woods. And so I'm hoping to make it this year.
And present.
It's only 100 miles away from me, so I can come a day early. Very excited. Well, thank you so much, Noah, Damon, and thank you, Sarah, for having us.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Irene. Thank you to Damon and to Noah, to all three of you for your amazing insight. Also, thank you to everyone who is watching and on the YouTube live chat, and also on Twitter. So thank you to everyone who will be listening as a podcast when this is released. So it'll be coming out on, I believe, 3 Tuesdays from now at 6 a.m. So definitely check for that on our podcast. So we will definitely look forward to putting that out. So if you are still around with us, then in 13 minutes, we talk with Jason Green of Link Education. So tune in for that. Podcast with an podcast.edumatch.org/tweet talk. So, all right. So everyone have a great one, and thank you.
Thank you.